Okay, so on notes 3-2, you're going to still be solving 3 variable systems like we were doing yesterday, trying to find the ordered triple that they all 3 have in common. The only difference is on these 3 equations, we're going to have an x, y, and a z on all 3 equations. So it's going to be a little different than yesterday. Okay, so just like yesterday, you can solve it multiple ways. So you don't have to solve it the same way that your neighbor is solving it. Okay, so first thing you need to do is, I like to use elimination. You're more than welcome to use substitution. First thing on elimination, look at all 3 equations and see which variable would be the easiest to eliminate. So if you look at the first and third equation, the z's automatically cancel. So there's going to be multiple steps here. So the first step is going to choose 2 equations, eliminate a variable. So I'm going to write down that first equation and the bottom equation. I don't have to do anything to either equation in order to eliminate the z's. They cancel out. So I'm going to combine like terms. That's going to be 3x plus 2y equals 4. Now, yesterday when we did this, we had another equation that only had an x and a y, so we were able to go ahead and use those 2 to eliminate either x or y. But notice we don't have that here. So your step 2 is going to be to use 2 other equations, but eliminate the same variable that you eliminated in the first step. So I'm going to use the first and the second equation, but again, we want to eliminate the same variable. So I'm going to write down 2x plus y minus z equals 2. And then I'm going to write down the second one, x plus 3y plus 2z equals 1. Now, I want to eliminate the same variable, so I want to eliminate the z's. Notice I would need to multiply the top equation by 2, because notice it's already negative. So that's going to be 4x plus 2y minus 2z equals 4. And I'm going to add those 2 equations together. So that's going to be 5x plus 5y, the z's cancel, equals 5. Anytime you're working with these equations and you can reduce them, what I mean by that is if you can divide every single number by the same number, you can reduce it. So notice all of these are 5s. I could divide the whole thing by 5, and it could be x plus y equals 1. And you don't have to do that, but sometimes it might make it easier for you whenever you're wanting to eliminate. Okay, so the reason for step 1 and step 2 is so that way now I have 2 equations that only have an x and a y. I'm going to use those to either eliminate x or y and then solve for the other variable. So I'm going to go to step 3, and I'm going to write down those 2 equations. I'm going to use the reduced one, but if you want to use 5x plus 5y equals 5, that's fine. Okay, so now choose whichever variable you want to eliminate. Let's eliminate the y. So I need to multiply it by -2 on that second equation. So that would be -2x minus 2y equals -2. And then I'm bringing down that top equation. So I'm going to add them together. -2x plus 3x is just x. The y's cancel, and that equals 2. So we found x. We need to find another variable. So when you have all 3 variables and all 3 of your equations on the originals, you will need to use one of the equations that you found on step 1 or step 2. So I'm going to use the one from step 2 because it's easier. I'm using that equation, so now I can substitute that 2 in for x. So that's 2 plus y equals 1. Subtract 2, and you get y equals a -1. Okay, so I know x, y, I'm looking for z now. So now I'm gonna have to plug in to one of those original equations. I'm gonna use that bottom one, so it's easier. So it's x plus y plus z equals 2. I know x is 2, I know y is a -1, and I want to solve for z. So combining those would be 1 plus z equals 2. So subtract 1 and you get z equals 1. So once you are done solving your system, make sure that you write it as an ordered triple. X comes first, so 2, then your y -1, and your z 1. Remember, just from yesterday, we talked about how to check it. Plug those three values in for x, y, and z on all three equations. It should be true. Okay, so let's look at the back. Okay, so notice these three equations here. They don't have the x, y, and z all on the same side. So make sure that your equations are in standard form, which is ax plus by plus cz equals d. So just make sure x, y, and z are all on the same side. So you might have to do something to your equations before you can actually start using elimination. So this first equation I'm going to rewrite. I'm going to subtract the y over, so we should have x minus y plus 5z. I'm going to put it in that order. That way x, y, and z are in the same, or in the correct order, equals -6. So all I did was I subtracted that y there. Looking at your second equation, I need to subtract the z. So that will be 3x plus 3y minus z equals 10. So all I did was I subtracted that z over. And then notice that that third equation, I don't have to do anything with. Okay, so once we have all three, then we're going to do like what we were doing on the front. So first, look at all three of your equations. Look to see what variable you would like to eliminate. It doesn't really matter. So I'm going to choose, I'm going to eliminate y's. Okay, so I'm going to use these two equations. So if I use those two equations and I eliminate the y's, I'm going to need to multiply one of them by a negative. So I'm going to have 3x plus 3y minus z equals 10. And then I'm going to multiply that bottom one by a -1. So that's a -x minus 3y minus 2z equals a -5. And I put -1. Okay, so I'm going to combine those two. I get 2x, the y's cancel, minus 3z, excuse me, equals 5. Okay, so that's my step 1. Choose two equations, eliminate a variable. Step 2 is use two other equations and eliminate the same variable. So I'm going to use these top two equations, which means I need to multiply that top one if I'm eliminating the y's by a 3 since it's already a -y. So that's going to be 3x minus 3y plus 15z equals -18. So I went ahead and distributed the 3 to all of those terms. And then I'm going to write down that second equation. 3x plus 3y minus z equals 10. So I'm going to combine those. That's 6x, y's cancel, plus 14z equals -8. Now we could divide here and reduce it, But look, before you do that, look over at your other equation, because remember, we're going to be combining these two. Notice there's a 2x and a 6x. So I'm going to go ahead and leave it like that and not reduce it. But if you want to reduce, that's fine. Okay, so I'm going to go to third step, which is to use those two equations from step 1, step 2 to eliminate x or z. I'm going to eliminate the x's since this is a 6x, this is a 2x. So I need to multiply this one by -3. So that's a -6x plus 9z equals -15. And then I'm just bringing down that other equation. Notice the x's cancel. That would be 23z equals -15 minus 8, which would be a -23. So z will equal -1. So we found z. Once we find one variable, the next step is to use one of the equations you found on step 1 or step 2, because they only have two variables. I'm going to use the first one, so 2x minus 3. I know z is -1 equals 5, so that would be 2x plus 3 equals 5. Subtract, and you get 2x equals 2, so x will equal 1. Once we know z and x, we can plug into one of the original equations after we rewrote it, or use one of the original, it doesn't really matter. So step 5 is to use one of those original, plug in for z and x, and then solve for y. I'm just going to use that bottom equation at the very top. So I know x is 1. I know z is -1. So that's 1 plus 3y minus 2 equals 5. I need to combine like terms. So that's 3y minus 1 equals 5. So add 1, you get 3y equals 6. So divide and you get y equals 2. So once you have found x, y, and z, you're writing it as an ordered triple. So x is 1, y is 2, z is -1. So that would be your solution. And remember to check it. Just plug those 3 in back into the very original before you rewrite in case you made a mistake. And then check all 3 equations. Okay, so when you have all 3 variables, first thing you do, choose 2 equations and choose what variable you want to eliminate. You'll do that on step 1, and you'll eliminate the same variable on step 2. So that way you can use those 2 equations to eliminate one of the 2 variables that you have in your equation. Once you've done that, then you can start substituting in and finding the other 2 variables.